Can you imagine that a prophecy written 2,700 years ago could be the root of one of the greatest religious divisions in the world? When you read Isaiah chapter 53, what do you see? A man nailed to a cross, or an entire nation carrying invisible wounds? Today, we are going to dive into one of the most controversial prophecies in the Bible, the prophecy of the suffering servant. For Christians, Isaiah chapter 53 is a clear window into Jesus Christ. For Jews, it is a living portrait of Israel itself. But what if what you've always heard isn't the whole story? Get ready. Some of the revelations you'll see here may change the way you read the Bible forever. So, who exactly is this servant? A single innocent man crushed, or an entire people carrying the sorrows of the world? The answer is much more complex than it seems. Let's discover it together. Does Isaiah chapter 53 truly speak of one suffering Messiah? Or is it a grand metaphor about the history of an entire nation? To understand, we need to look at the text itself, not just the interpretations. Every word matters. Let's walk through it together, verse by verse. For Christians, the arm of the Lord is interpreted as the power of God revealed in Jesus Christ. According to John chapter 12, verse 38, the apostle quotes Isaiah chapter 53, verse 1, directly to show that many would not believe even after witnessing Jesus' miracles. Jewish tradition sees the arm of the Lord as a symbol of God's saving actions on behalf of Israel, like during the Exodus from Egypt. The people of Israel, constantly despised by the nations, are seen as the ones whose message is rejected. But how could a people be compared to the very arm of God? And how could a simple man carry such a divine image? Isaiah chapter 53, verse 2, "For he grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him." In Christianity, Jesus is seen as the tender shoot, a fragile sprout growing in the midst of hostility. His humble appearance and lack of social recognition align perfectly with this description. In Judaism, the people of Israel, especially during exile, are seen as a root growing in dry ground, weak, oppressed, without external glory. Israel, considered small among the nations, is associated with having no beauty before the mighty empires. Imagine a small plant pushing through lifeless desert soil. Who would bet on it? Such was the servant, whether a man or an entire people. Isaiah 53 also says, "He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with suffering, and as one from whom people hide their faces, he was despised, and we held him of no account." In the Christian view, this rejection is interpreted as Jesus suffering at the hands of his own people and the authorities, a man who endures pain and is abandoned. In the Jewish view, Israel itself is the man of sorrows, deeply familiar with historical suffering, persecutions, exiles, and the Holocaust. The people carry within them the world's ongoing rejection. But can a people truly feel pain like an individual? Or can a single man represent an entire nation? What comes next might completely change the way we understand this passage. Up until now, both the Christian and Jewish readings can walk in parallel, even if on different tracks. But the next verses, they mark a true turning point. Who truly carries the sorrows of others? A carpenter from Nazareth, or an entire nation crossing centuries of pain? In verse 1 we read, "Who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed?" Some readers, especially in the Christian context, see this as a direct reference to Jesus Christ, the one whose message of salvation was widely rejected, even after so many signs and miracles. The Gospel of John, chapter 12, verse 38, even quotes this passage to explain why many would not believe in Jesus, despite witnessing his works. In the Jewish understanding, the arm of the Lord is a classic symbol of God's intervention in the history of Israel. Just like in the Exodus, God manifests his power, yet the world often rejects the message that Israel carries. Isaiah's question, then, echoes the frustration of a people entrusted with a divine mission that few are willing to recognize. Verse 2 says, "For he grew up before him like a tender shoot, and like a root out of dry ground. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, and no beauty that we should desire him." In the Christian reading, this image describes the humility of Jesus, someone who appears in a simple way, without any external appeal that would attract attention. The idea of a suffering Messiah without worldly prestige fits perfectly here. On the other hand, Jewish tradition interprets the tender shoot as Israel itself, in a state of exile and humiliation. Growing like a root out of dry ground, weakened, oppressed, invisible to the eyes of the great empires. Just like a tiny plant in a sun-scorched desert, the people of Israel seemed insignificant to the nations, but were in reality the vehicle of the divine plan. Picture a small flower blooming in the middle of a cracked, sun-baked desert. Almost no one notices, and those who do give it no value. Such was the servant described by Isaiah, whether as an individual or as a nation. And you, have you ever felt small or invisible in the face of your circumstances? How does this image resonate with your faith and your story? From the Christian perspective, the picture becomes even clearer. Jesus is seen as this man of sorrows, deeply rejected by his own people and the authorities, an innocent man suffering without being recognized. Meanwhile, from the Jewish perspective, Israel is the collective man of sorrows, a people enduring centuries of suffering, from the destructions of the temple to the Holocaust, and even today bearing historical scars that are often ignored or minimized by the world. But could it be that Isaiah was describing, at the same time, the journey of an individual and of a nation? Or are we facing a decisive choice that defines our entire understanding of biblical history? Get ready, because what comes next is even more challenging. Up to this point, we have seen the servant growing without beauty or glory. But now, the tone of the text shifts. It's no longer just about rejection, it's about bearing the suffering of others. Who is carrying the pain that was not theirs? The answer could change everything you think about Isaiah chapter 53. Verse 4 says, "Surely he took up our infirmities and carried our sorrows, yet we considered him stricken by God, smitten by him, and afflicted." Within the Christian tradition, this is one of the most powerful declarations. Jesus did not merely suffer, he bore the pains of humanity, replacing the suffering of the common man with his own. The New Testament echoes this view in Matthew chapter 8, verse 17, which explicitly cites Isaiah to affirm that Jesus took upon himself our infirmities. However, in the Jewish tradition, the picture is different. Israel, as a people, carries the infirmities of the nations. Through a long history of persecutions, exiles, and tragedies, Israel suffers not only for its own sins, but also because of the injustices of the world. The sufferings of Israel, according to this interpretation, are not a deserved punishment, but a burden imposed by hostile nations. Imagine a lightning rod in a violent storm. It absorbs all the electric charges that could otherwise destroy everything around it. Such is the servant, whether as an innocent man on a cross or as a nation crushed by history. And in your personal view, who do you believe is carrying the sorrows of the world today? An individual? A people? Share your reflection in the comments. Verse 5 says, "But he was pierced for our transgressions, he was crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed." For many Christians, this is the very heart of the message, the substitutionary sacrifice of Jesus. The language of being pierced for our transgressions is seen as a clear prophecy of the Messiah's redemptive suffering. The cross, in this understanding, is the place where humanity's spiritual healing was accomplished. In the Jewish view, the interpretation follows a different path. The people of Israel, being crushed by the iniquities of the nations and by their own failures, become an instrument of potential future redemption, not through a substitutionary death, but through testimony and perseverance in the face of adversity. The healing that Isaiah mentions would be the ultimate restoration of Israel and the nations after collective suffering. But can collective suffering truly heal the wounds of the world, or would it require a single, deep, and eternal personal sacrifice? The dilemma only deepens from here. Let's look at verse 6. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. The image of the stray sheep is powerful in both interpretations. In the Christian context, it reinforces the idea of a lost humanity in need of a shepherd, Jesus, who takes upon himself the weight of humanity's sins. The Apostle Peter, in his first letter, chapter 2, verses 24 and 25, directly connects this concept to Jesus. In Jewish tradition, the focus is on the collective. Each person and each nation has strayed from the right paths, but the suffering of the servant, understood as Israel, is seen as part of a process by which the world is reminded of divine justice. The servant not only suffers, he reveals the distance between humanity and God. Picture an entire flock scattering across a desert, each sheep running in a different direction, lost and without guidance. The only hope would be if someone, alone, could somehow bring them all back. Who would that someone be? If the tension was already high, the next verses will take the mystery even deeper, because now Isaiah begins to reveal the servant's destiny, an unjust trial, silent suffering, and a future few could have imagined. Until now, we have seen a servant rejected, wounded, and burdened with sorrow. But what happens when injustice reaches its peak? Isaiah chapter 53 now leads us to a silent courtroom where the victim does not defend himself and the world barely notices what is about to happen. Who is this silent condemned one? Get ready to discover details you may have never noticed before. Isaiah chapter 53 verse 7. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and as a sheep before its shearers is silent, so he did not open his mouth. In the Christian understanding, this is one of the most vivid portrayals of the passion of Jesus. The Gospels describe Jesus at his trial before Pilate and Herod as someone who answers very little, accepting his suffering without resistance, a lamb led to the slaughter. This association is further reinforced in the Acts of the Apostles, chapter 8, verse 32, when Philip finds the Ethiopian eunuch reading exactly this passage and explains that it refers to Jesus. On the other hand, Jewish tradition sees in this silence a powerful image of Israel's historical stance in the face of injustice. Many times the Jewish people were led into suffering without the possibility of defense or even a cry that could be heard. Just like a lamb that can do nothing before the shearers, Israel bore its sufferings in a forced silence. Imagine a voice that wants to scream but is silenced by the weight of circumstances. A voice the world chooses not to hear. Such is the servant, silent, not out of cowardice, but because the world decided not to listen. Do you believe that true strength might lie precisely in those who remain silent in the face of injustice? By oppression and judgment he was taken away. And who can speak of his descendants? For he was cut off from the land of the living. For the transgression of my people he was stricken. Within the Christian faith, this verse is seen as a description of Jesus' unjust trial. Without the right to a legitimate process, Jesus is cut off from the land of the living, killed for the sake of the people. The phrase, "for the transgression of my people," reinforces for Christians the idea of substitution. He died for the sins of many. In Jewish tradition, the phrase, "who can speak of his generation," is understood as an expression of perplexity at Israel's continual suffering. The people are torn from the land of the living, exiled, persecuted, and few take the time to count the pain of their generation. But what if this phrase, cut off from the land of the living, hides an even deeper meaning, something that is not always said out loud? In the next few minutes, we will reveal some surprising interpretations. Chapter 9 says, "He was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death, although he had done no violence, nor was any deceit in his mouth." In the New Testament, this scene is seen as an astonishing prophetic detail. Jesus was crucified between criminals, but was buried in the new tomb of Joseph of Arimathea, a rich man, fulfilling in the eyes of Christians this prophecy with almost surgical precision. In the Jewish reading, the emphasis is on the servant suffering unjustly. Even though he is without guilt, he is treated as a criminal. The people of Israel, despite their faithfulness to God, are placed among the wicked by the nations, yet they maintain their spiritual integrity. It's like an innocent man thrown into a prison full of criminals without having committed any crime. In the eyes of the world, he is just another face. But in the eyes of God, he remains righteous. Have you ever witnessed situations where human justice failed, but spiritual integrity remained unshaken? After so much suffering, what can we expect? Would it be the end of the story? Isaiah chapter 53, however, holds an unexpected twist, a conclusion that carries hope and deep meaning for both Jews and Christians to this day. After so much pain, would it be fair for everything to simply end in sorrow? Isaiah chapter 53 brings us a surprising turn. The servant who was crushed by suffering is now exalted. But what does this exaltation mean? An individual victory or a collective redemption? Isaiah chapter 53 verse 10. Yet it was the Lord's will to crush him and cause him to suffer. And though the Lord makes his life an offering for sin, he will see his offspring and prolong his days, and the will of the Lord will prosper in his hand. And in the Christian understanding, this is one of the central mysteries. The suffering of Jesus was not an accident, but part of God's divine plan for redemption. His death is seen as a sin offering, and his resurrection, understood as the prolonging of his days, confirms the triumph of God's will. In the Jewish context, the interpretation points to Israel as a people who, after enduring historical atonements, will see their offspring upon returning from exile and will prosper under divine blessing. The good pleasure of the Lord would be the full restoration of the people and their spiritual mission among the nations. It's like someone crossing a burning forest, burned, wounded, and on the other side, finding not death, but a garden in full bloom. This is the kind of turning point that Isaiah begins to describe here. Do you believe that suffering can be transformed into blessing? Now let's look at verse 11. After he has suffered, he will see the light of life and be satisfied. By his knowledge, my righteous servant will justify many, and he will bear their iniquities. For Christians, this marks the crowning of Jesus' messianic role. He justifies many through his sacrifice, offering access to redemption. The idea of the fruit of the travail of his soul echoes the transformative impact of the cross and the resurrection. From the Jewish perspective, Israel, after enduring suffering, becomes a light to the nations. The justification of many does not come through death, but through the living testimony of faith, perseverance, and obedience to God. Suffering transforms Israel into a moral example for the world. But can true justice be achieved through a single sacrifice? Or does it require entire generations persevering throughout history? The answer goes far beyond what is usually told. Therefore I will give him a portion among the great, and he will divide the spoils with the strong, because he poured out his life unto death and was numbered with the transgressors. For he bore the sin of many and made intercession for the transgressors. In the New Testament, this verse is seen as the crowning of Jesus' sacrifice, his death among sinners, his identification with fallen humanity, and his ongoing intercession on behalf of all. The book of Hebrews, chapter 7, verse 25, emphasizes this intercessory role of Christ. In the Jewish interpretation, the image is of Israel, who, even while being treated as a sinner among the nations, remains faithful and intercedes not only for itself, but for the world. The dividing of the spoils symbolizes the final victory and the reward for perseverance. Picture a soldier who, after years of battle, receives not only medals, but the eternal gratitude of those who were protected by his sacrifices. This is the image Isaiah paints at the end of this song. And so ends the song of the suffering servant. But the great question remains: does Isaiah 53 point to a single Savior, or to the journey of an entire people? The decision about who the servant is still echoes in the faith of millions, and maybe it echoes in your heart today as well. Today, we walk together through one of the most profound and mysterious chapters of Scripture, Isaiah chapter 53. We saw how Christianity interprets the suffering servant as the figure of Jesus Christ, the Messiah who bears the sorrows and sins of humanity. We also explored how, in Judaism, the servant represents the people of Israel itself, a nation that, even when crushed by the nations, remains a living witness of the covenant with God. We saw that, for Christians, redemption is achieved through the sacrifice of a single innocent man, while for Jews, redemption is a collective process, lived out across generations. And while one tradition sees healing through the cross, the other sees healing through the scars of a resilient people. Had you ever thought about these differences between Christianity and Judaism? Leave your thoughts in the comments. We read and respond to every one of them. If this video helped you see the Bible from a new perspective, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Here, every study is a journey of deep discoveries between Christianity and Judaism. Leave a like to support this content and share this video with anyone you believe needs to see this revealing comparison. Until our next meeting, where the Bible will once again be our map and curiosity our guide.